Welcome to Fun Palais Podcast, where we are unpacking opinions and changing destinations. I am your host, Shirley Altador, where each week we will chat about how to rise strong out of all types of obstacles that come with relationships. Through personal life experiences and discussions ranging from infidelity, trust, forgiveness, sex, heartbreak, self-love, and so much more. I am passionate and obsessed to provide guidance to every woman to create a better life. Let's dive in, pull up a seat, make sure you're cozy, and get ready to be challenged and encouraged while you learn. With me, your virtual girlfriend. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Fun Palais. Today we have a guest, and her name is Mandi Pratt. Meet a mom who wasn't looking to be a badass when danger came knocking at her door. She just wanted to know real, actionable tips to help protect herself and young son from crazy life situation that left them in the throes of an FBI search for her fugitive ex-husband and serial bank robber. Mandi, over the past decade, has spent countless hours in hands-on training from a top-level self-defense instructor. She claimed her life and power back and now teaches other women how to do the same through her book and online safety course for women. Mandi, welcome. How are you today?
Good. Thank you for having me.
I am happy that you are here because, number one, what intrigued me was my story made the news, and I was like, oh my gosh. And I wanted to ask you, like, did you make it to Investigation Discovery yet? They didn't contact you yet, did you?
No.
So I was like, this is going to be interesting. And for this woman, again, to be able to hold her head up high, regain her power is phenomenal. So I guess if you can just, give us a little background of your story, how it all started. How did you end up in the news, my dear?
Yes. So I remember the day it was that I knew that I had to be in charge of my own safety. And that was when I got a frantic call from a family member who was watching my son, who was 3 at the time. And my ex-husband, who I had just divorced from, happened to show up at the home and was trying to break in to take our son away. And she was trying to lock all the doors and the windows as quickly as she could while he was going around. So luckily I was close. My mother and I were in the car and we drove over as fast as we could. And luckily there was a friend of ours who happened to see us, and he and his friend asked us, "Hey, you want us to follow you?" And we said, "Yes, please." And so we zoomed back to the house. And just as we got there, he had come back through the front gate and was about to leave. And they said, "Can we help you? What are you doing here?" And he said, I'm leaving. And he took off and ran around the corner where he was parked. And I called the police, but the police took 20 minutes to get there. So while I was waiting, I'm just realizing, oh my gosh, like this, I need to be able to help myself. What if these guys didn't come with us? What would I do? I was clueless. I didn't know anything about how to protect myself.
How old was your son at the time?
He was about 3.5 or so.
Okay, so
So
it's been a while. He's 19 now, and this was
yes.
the situation at your friend's house. He was 3.5 years old, so young
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
probably scary for him.
Mhm.
And so when you got there, he was walking away. What
Mhm.
was your friend's emotional state?
My friend in the home was very upset, because she was responsible for my son, and here this was happening. So I felt horrible. So when the police finally showed up, it was just one officer, and he told me, you might want to think about getting a restraining order because right now there's no boundaries set. you know, the mother, he's the father. And so that's when I decided, yes, I would go forward with the restraining order. But the tricky thing was he didn't heed the restraining order, which happens so often, and I think a lot of women maybe get confused with that because they think a restraining order will stop that person from coming, and harassing and showing up in the middle of the night and calling you 20 times a day. But what it does actually is just set up a boundary that the law has actually set. So this, even though didn't protect me physically, it did show the courts his character, and it showed them that he was not able to follow that. So that was a plus on my end, which came to help me later.
And I've never had a restraining order on anybody, but if I can just rationalize it with the restraining order, and I'm glad you explained it that way, because the restraining order is not going to protect you physically, because as human beings, we don't abide by rules sometimes. So this
Hmm.
person, obviously, if he's already acting this way, you already know he may possibly break the restraining order, he or someone else. So is the
Hmm.
restraining order more like a barrier between you and the court system that gives maybe the court system additional rights, kind of like when you go into contract with somebody, where if you have a signature, you have more ability maybe to take that contractor to small claims court if they don't finish their work, as opposed if it's just through a word of mouth, you have
Hmm.
no protection. Is that
Hmm.
kind of like the same thing with the restraining order? Is that really what it's doing, where it's kind of just saying, if I was to take you to court, they're going to see that I had a restraining order. And if you ever come to my house and I have to call, this
Hmm.
kind of just gives me an added protection. Like, okay, well, she had this restraining order and she had to call us 5 times because
Hmm.
you were not listening. Is that kind of like the same thing
Hmm.
or something? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, it's similar. And so when you go back to court and you show them, this person is in contempt of court, they are not following the law. This is actually the law,
Hmm.
and they can go to jail for that. So,
Got it.
yeah.
Okay.
And also, another really important thing to note is that when somebody gets a restraining order, when a woman gets a restraining order, or a man also sometimes, but you mainly hear of the women, when they get a restraining order, they are most in danger right after that. So it's also notable to pay attention to that. So just because you get a restraining order, it doesn't mean, oh, I'm good. You need to still watch your back, especially when it's new like that.
Is it because, obviously, probably because the person's angry? Does the person get a
Hmm.
notification sent to their
Hmm.
home?
Hmm.
Okay.
They actually get served. So that
Okay.
means you can actually have the police do that, or you can pay. There's a service to do that.
Okay.
So there's different ways to do that, but they are served. They are given the paper, so they can't say, "Hey, I never received it in the mail."
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Mhm.
anyone who gets a restraining order is actually served the restraining
Mhm.
order. It's not just a notification that's sent in the mail like, hey, this
Right.
person did. Okay. All right,
Yeah.
got it. Makes sense. Okay.
Mhm.
So now on h- how long have you guys had been divorced before
Mhm.
that day happened?
So, yeah, so when I back up a bit, uh, I remember I actually met him in my high school church youth group, and we got married when we were young, about 20, and went off to college and all of that. And I noticed, he started having an anger issue, and it got worse as time went on. And eventually it turned into verbal abuse, which turned into physical abuse, which is very likely to happen once verbal abuse starts,
Mm-hmm.
and also emotional abuse. And I finally realized when my son was about 3 that it was time to leave. And just like so many other women, like, I left once and then I came back. They always talk you back into coming back.
Yeah.
And I was only back for another week or 2 and then realized when I wasn't able to take a shower without being interrupted, hearing him yelling at my son, and I was afraid for my son's safety, so I was like, "That's it." Got out of the shower and was like, "I'm leaving and I'm never coming back." And so I did, and I would love to say that made everything roses and we were all good from there, but it just pissed him off further,
Yeah.
and it made it very difficult in the beginning. But of course, I'm so glad I did it now. So unfortunately, he ended up uh, spiraling down into a very dark place. Turns out he had a mental illness that he wouldn't really get help for, and started gambling, and then ended up in jail for stealing something due to the gambling. And that was only the beginning. When that happened, everybody said, "Oh, maybe this is when he hits rock bottom, and now he'll come back and be able to be a great father at least, and be there." And I was like, "Yeah, but sadly that wasn't the case." And let's see, it was a little bit after that I had gotten a divorce. And then shortly after that was another one of those days that will always stick in my head. And that was when I came back to that same house where we were staying, and there was a little business card stuck into the door. And I read on it, it said FBI, coroner's unit, and robbery. And I thought, oh my gosh, my heart sank into my stomach. And I thought, all right, all these suicide threats, he's actually done it, or he's back in jail for, stealing about gambling. So luckily I was by myself. I did not have my son at the time. So I took the card out, carried it up the stairs. Remember how heavy each of those steps were as I was walking up to that phone to find out what we had here.
Now, this is the house you two had resided before you left, correct?
This was my parents' home that we were staying at, because I had left and I had divorced and was trying to get back on my feet again.
Okay, so they
So
left the card at your parents' home.
the FBI, yes.
Okay, so that
Nobody was home. Mhm,
gotcha. Okay, so
mhm.
now how many years had you been married before you left?
11.
Oh, quite some time. Did you guys go to
Yeah.
college together?
Yep. Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Oh, you
We
guys
were
went.
married when we were 20, and I left when I was about 31, I guess it would be.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
Mhm,
it was your whole entire 20s you were
mhm,
with this man. Okay.
mhm,
So at what year did you when did things started to get alarming? Into what year? And
mhm,
what do you feel as though, and I'm not saying you're the victim is, but what caused it, you think? Was
mhm.
it his turn? What turned for him?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I remember I had only really seen one red flag when we were dating, and of course you're young and in love, and I
Exactly.
was naive. Like my parents had a great relationship as far as I knew, so I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
So we got married and went off to college, and it wasn't until we moved away to the other coast, we're from the West Coast, we moved to the East Coast to go to college, and all of a sudden he turned into somebody I did not know. It was like Jekyll and Hyde,
Mm-hmm.
and he would disappear and be gone for a while. And I was like, "What? Where are you? Who are you?" And it was wild, right? And so I just thank God I had a great job and I had my friends there, and I felt like they were my little family.
It was your
So
escape.
yes, but to be honest, I started having panic attacks because
Oh.
of this. It was so difficult, and there I was without family, but I did have my job.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's when I started to notice, whoa, like we're in trouble, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
And then we moved back when he finished to the West Coast, and he got a great job, and then things seemed okay again.
Okay.
So we had our son because I thought, okay, things are on the up and up.
Gotcha.
He's not stressed like that anymore, and so I thought. And then pretty much everything fell apart, about when my son was 1.5. or so, the abuse started, and happened once or twice. And then we went to counseling and we stuck together another year or so. And that helped a bit, but I knew that we were still in trouble. So that's when I knew that it was time to leave. But looking back, you had asked, how did we get there? What happened?
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was kind of a perfect storm. So he did not have a good childhood. He grew up in a home that was abusive.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it turns out he had a mental illness as well as a personality disorder. And then I believe that all the stress of going to get his master's degree, really, those three things put together was what caused everything to break.
Gotcha. Okay. So now, did he know about the mental illness? Okay, so he did not. This did
He
not
did
come
not.
till later.
Hmm.
And obviously, because life changed for him, I guess he left now his comfort zone, I guess you can say, and moved from west to east. I guess that all interrupted his whole balance. And
Hmm.
because you said when you guys came back, things seemed okay, but
Hmm.
things were not okay because things seem to now have gotten worse. Now, when you say abuse, did he first try verbal abuse or had verbal abuse
Hmm.
been present? And the two situations, were they physical?
So he started in with verbal abuse. I would be doing the dishes with him or something, and I don't know, he would just lose it and start calling me an effing bitch and all this. And I'm like, what just happened? Hello? Like, and he'll break a dish or something. I'm like, what? Like, this makes no sense, right?
Got
And
it.
then it was just when he was under stress, I guess. The other time he hurt our son was when he was super stressed. And then the time when he hurt me was stressful too. Our son was crying, wouldn't stop. You know how kids do when they're
Mm-hmm.
little.
Yeah.
And he was going in to my son's room, and I knew he was, probably going to hurt him. So I grabbed him, and he turned around and, called me effing bitch again, and put his fist up to punch me, and instead threw me across the living room floor, and I went sliding across on my back.
Oh gosh.
And I kicked him out and told him I was going to call the police, and I didn't, but I really wish I would have.
Mm-hmm.
Because, by the way, for those of you who are listening, it's really good to have documentation. So, because I had no documentation, he always denied that he ever hurt me. And you can always decide to not press charges. So, it's important to get documentation. Will that piss them off? Of course. So it's tricky, but you need documentation somehow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So even if you don't press charges, just that simple call being recorded and the police
Mhm.
coming out, which you know is
Mhm.
documented, will help
Mhm.
in court or help with
Mhm.
anything you needed to do.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So now, after these two incidents, I'm assuming you still loved him. You wanted to make it work for your family. I'm assuming these are all the thoughts that are going in your head. Um, you got decide to go to counseling, and he agreed.
Yes. Uh-huh. He agreed. Yeah.
Okay.
And the hardest part was when somebody like him, he was very charming, and nobody ever thought that he would do anything bad, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
one of these guys. So it was difficult because, a lot of days he was really good to us and he was fun to be with, but then it was like walking on eggshells because I never knew when he wouldn't be.
Yeah. And you want to think the best of people,
Mhm.
especially your partner.
Mhm.
So I understand. I totally can understand and relate because you want to think the best of people. So when things go south, you're rationalizing in your head, like, wait a minute, what's going on here? What triggered this? And this is where the self-sabotage start because you're asking, did I say something? I can only imagine when you're doing the dishes, you're like, well, what did I say? How
Mhm.
did this great situation just turn so south so quickly?
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. So now, after counseling, you guys went. Now, what year are we in? Because you said it was a total of. So, what year is this? This has, if your son is a year and a half, is this like year
Uh-huh.
6 or year 7?
So my son was born in 2001. That's how I always remember what year everything was. So
Okay.
we left in 2004.
Okay.
And then 2005, I got the divorce.
Okay.
And then 2006 was when the FBI showed up, and when, things got really dicey.
Gotcha. So now we're going
Hmm.
to fast forward. Obviously, things didn't work out. You get
Hmm.
the divorce in 2005.
Hmm.
Now, you get the letter on your parents' door with the little card. Was this after the whole incident at your friend's house where he tried to
Hmm.
break into her home? So
Hmm.
now, as you're going up those steps, those
Hmm.
heavy steps, each step felt heavy, you said.
Hmm.
What happens after? Did you call them?
Hmm.
What happened?
So I walked upstairs, sat down in the study, picked up the phone, dialed the number, and the person who answered was an FBI agent, and he started to question me. Are you divorced, or what's your status here? And I said, yes, we've just gotten divorced. He said, well, that's a damn good thing, because you'd be in a lot of trouble. And I was like, excuse me?
Is this
And
how
he
he was
said,
talking to you?
yeah, he was like, do you know about your husband, I guess your ex-husband's whereabouts for the past 6 to 9 months? I was like, well, we've been seeing him for supervised visits. He goes, well, we've been looking for him for 6 to 9 months because he's been robbing banks. And I was like, excuse me? What? What do you mean? And he said, yeah, he's been robbing banks for the past, half a year or so throughout Southern California in all these different counties.
What?
And I was like, what? And he could clearly see that I knew nothing about it. And he said, look, we don't need your, statement saying, that you see his pictures and you see that's him or whatever, but I'd still like to come talk to you. So is it okay if I come over tomorrow? And I said, sure, that's fine. So he came over the next morning, sat down at the table, and out of his briefcase pulled out the surveillance pictures and just put them out on the table. And there they were, fanned out across the table. And I could see it was him. And he was wearing the shirt I had bought him for Father's Day that matched our son's shirt, gray, navy blue.
Oh my
And then
goodness.
I noticed in all of these pictures, he had on the floppy hat that we had worn, on vacation in Mexico, floating down the river, during those good times. And believe it or not, they actually dubbed him the floppy hat bandit
That's his
because he
name,
wore that every time.
the floppy hat bandit. So his whole face was showing, I'm assuming, or no?
It's floppy hat, so you can't see his face that well. So that's how he kind of like hid.
Okay. Okay.
Hmm.
Oh my gosh. Now this obviously do do you know if this was taking place when you were married, or did this all
It
start
was not.
after? Okay.
No, it started after.
All
Yeah.
right. Oh my
Hmm.
goodness.
After the gambling, then he started robbing banks to get the money to
So
gamble. So
he just spiraled down.
yeah, kept going down and down until can't really go any further down. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did they catch him? Like after now they're at their house, these pictures are laid out. Mandy's
Hmm.
probably like, "Oh my freaking gosh. What the
Hmm.
heck?
Hmm.
What am I involved in here? Who is this
Exactly.
person?"
Right. Right.
Okay, so what's happening now?
Right. So, you know, they finally got him. They got him while he was driving, and when they pulled him over, he had evidence in his car, so it was easy for them, to put
Okay.
him away. So
Okay.
they did, and that was probably about. I think his sentence was 8 years, but he got 7 that he actually served. And during that time, you would have thought he would have left us alone, but he didn't. It's that whole power and control thing that abusers
Oh.
do. So he brought me to court from prison. You can appear telephonically, and was trying to make me bring our son to visit him in prison.
So he ordered his lawyer to have visitations for you to bring the son for
Mhm.
visitation. So that's
Mhm.
why you
Through the
were
prison.
through the prison. But I'm
Mhm.
assuming, did he win?
Well, mm, kind of a long story, but
Give us the short version. Did you
yeah,
have to take him up there?
um, I did not. My
Okay.
father took my son
Okay.
um, about when my son was about 6 or so.
Okay.
And my parents are amazing. They would take my son and make it like a fun thing before or after.
Okay.
And my son would see his dad in prison. And luckily, that did not happen too many times because that's awfully young for a child to have to do that. It's amazing in California, like they give the fathers a lot of visitation rights.
Wow. Okay. So that's why I
Yeah,
understand it's a long story. Yeah. Just give us the
yeah,
short version because that's probably
yep,
a whole nother episode trying to
yeah,
explain that.
right.
Okay. So, okay. Well, that's good you had that boundary. And that's wonderful that your parents was a great support system for you.
Amazing.
And you did not
Yes,
have to go up there because that
no,
you needed to definitely keep arm distance away from this
yeah,
individual. But
hmm,
okay, so wonderful. Your parents stepped in, they took your son up for the visitations. You did not have to worry about that.
correct.
7 years, I'm assuming, now has passed.
Hmm.
How are you feeling? And did he try to make his presence yet again? Now, how old is your son after the 7 years have passed?
So when the 7 years had passed, our son was in junior high,
Hmm.
and he was seeing his dad again with supervised visits. And then they turned to unsupervised because my ex-husband appeared to be, behaving. Um, and
And I
it,
know at a mother, I don't mean to, you are terrified. And this is extremely hard. And this is why we live in such an understanding world. But as a
hmm,
mother, I can relate when you want to do what's best for your children. But
hmm,
at the same time, you know this person is not a good individual.
hmm, right,
How do you even, and I'm not asking you this question, but it's just
hmm,
a general statement I'm making.
right,
How do you even find balance? How do you still be a good mother, let him be around his father?
hmm,
These are all tough decisions, Mandy. I can only
right,
imagine. Okay,
yeah.
so now the visits were unsupervised. Then what's
Hmm.
going on now?
And so it was my son's eighth grade promotion, where they graduate from eighth grade. And he was supposed to come that day. And of course, that's very uncomfortable for me. So my family was with me, and I'm just, kind of dreading it. Well, he never showed up. And it turns out that he had done another crime. And so he went on the run. And that ended up being about another 2 years. And they had finally found him, but he escaped. Somebody tipped him off. He was in another state under another identity,
Got it.
and somebody tipped him off, so he got away again. So that was another year, making it 2 years.
So now son's in
And
high school.
yes, and uh, the FBI finally were able to get involved instead of just the local police from that one crime,
Mm-hmm.
bringing in more resources.
Got it.
And they had discovered that, yes, he has many different identities and lived with many different people and was robbing banks again in different states. So, because of that, they were able to grab him again. And
Okay.
now he's serving another term for about another 7 years or so.
So this
But this,
man is presently in prison.
correct. And thankfully, he's left me alone now. So,
Okay. Okay. So when is he due to come out?
I think it's about another 3 years or so,
Oh,
3, 4 years.
okay.
Hmm.
Wow. So he's not recouped. Now your son is older, so
Hmm.
he's able to, make decisions on his own. So whatever he chooses, however he chooses to interact with his father at this point, it's going to be his decision because you do not have to get involved,
Exactly.
obviously. But through all this, how were you able to regain your power to still keep yourself focused, Mandy, to still wake up in the morning, go with the day-to-day daily tasks that need to be done, be a mother, and also be married again and still see the joy and the happiness and the greatness in life through all this negativity.
Mhm. Yeah, it was a mix of things. I do believe in God, and I
Hmm.
believe that He helped a lot. There were nights, that were absolutely horrible, and I prayed, "Please help me even be able to sleep. Help me be able to wake up and care for my son,
I can
by
only
myself
imagine. Yeah.
while I'm going through this trauma after, he just kept coming after me however he could.
Hmm.
Emotional abuse, just, and you can't make it stop sometimes. And so there were a couple different things that helped. One was that praying and meditating and getting help from another friend who had been through similar circumstances. A lot of people just didn't get this type of thing because to them he appeared, like this charming, great person. So it's hard for everybody to understand. So that was key, was finding a couple friends who had been through something like that.
Hmm.
And then another one was really working on myself. So, when my son and I were living by ourselves, I would pop in a cassette tape that tells you how long ago that was into my
Oh.
Walkman and just listen, while I'm walking him before dinner time or whatever, and just learn more about becoming stronger. And then eventually too was learning self-defense, because throughout that time when he was not in prison and was able to be out, it was still very scary for me because I didn't know what all he was involved in, or who knows what else he was doing,
Yeah.
So I went and learned from a top level self defense expert who trains the police, and has even trained some FBI. And I wanted to learn, hey, how do I learn this for myself? Because I don't want to ever have to be in that situation again where I feel so vulnerable
Hmm.
and helpless, And so while I was learning all of that, I thought, number one, this is so intimidating for a woman to go learn from these guys, because
Exactly.
a lot of like their websites and stuff you see, like they're like tough guys, like come be a badass, And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. I just want to be a mom and learn how to
Defend
like,
myself.
yeah, So, so I did that, took some private lessons, and then I also took a workshop where you actually fight off the instructor who has like padded, stuff on so you can fight back, and that was so helpful. And so it was just really taking baby steps in all these different directions of, counseling and getting help from an expert, and then also learning from a self defense expert. And it was interesting because while learning that, that really gave my confidence a boost, and
Good.
really helped me get my power back because I was like,
Good.
I'm not vulnerable anymore. Oh my gosh, like I know what to do. Like
That's
if
good.
he or anybody else shows up, like I know how to kick their butt.
Exactly. And that's
So
good.
yeah. And so also, I thought, oh my gosh, like a lot of these things I'm learning, just any woman should know this stuff, because a lot of it really is about mindset, being aware, and preventing, of course, and planning ahead. So,
And
yeah, that was
also
key.
being a voice for other women because, stuff like
Mm,
this is not talked about. And this is why
yeah.
when women such as yourself, women such as me, everyone has a story. Everyone's story is
Yeah.
different. And for you to have the courage to speak out, to let other women know, hey, listen, there's life after death. I don't mean physical death, but I mean the
Hmm.
situation that a person is
Sure.
in,
Hmm.
that you can still live a prosperous, great life. And
Hmm.
you are just a breath of fresh air to these women. Like, do what you have to do. It is okay. It is not your fault. Separate yourself. You are not the victim, you know?
Hmm.
So let's talk about happy times and then we're going to talk about the self defense that you offer. How long have
Hmm.
you been married now?
Oh, so that's been 13 years.
Oh my gosh, long
Yeah.
time. Long time.
Yeah. I
I'm
was
trying
just
to like fit the math in. I'm like, okay, so I'm assuming you met him.
uh
How old was your son when you met your present husband?
So I met my present husband through all that craziness, right? So
Okay.
my son was 5, and then we got married when my son was 6
Okay.
or so. Everything gets foggy in there just because it was so traumatic.
Well, yeah, because you're trying to still be now you're a wife to this man.
Yeah, right.
Okay. And you still have this nonsense you need to deal with
Mhm,
here on the side. And then
mhm.
I can only imagine how it was pulling you. Did you ever have times where you thought at your present husband, like, don't you ever dare, don't put me through
Oh,
the,
yeah.
you know?
I told him from the get-go. Well, in the beginning, we were engaged, and at one point I said, "You know what? I don't know if this is such a good idea, like, I'm still messed up." And he was like, "We got this. It's gonna be okay," And he was so patient, and it's weird because I never thought I would ever be able to trust another man, but just his demeanor, he's gentle in a way, and I just knew that I could trust him.
That's good.
But it was difficult in the beginning,
I,
because I'm still healing, my ex-husband is still causing trouble.
you're still
So
in the middle of it. Like it's
yeah,
still going on.
yes, yeah.
But
Like, I don't recommend that for most people.
but life is a risk. There's no foolproof formula when it comes
Mhm,
to relationships.
that's
There is
true.
not. Life is a risk. So you took that risk and it ended up being a great blessing. 13 years
Uh-huh.
later, you guys are still together. And
Yep.
he was good for you, which is good. So now the defense that you offer for the women, how does it work? Is it, especially during this pandemic, how have you made that work? Are we doing one-on-one? How is the training and how can women get connected with you? And
Mhm,
you're obviously, I'm in New Jersey, you're in California, right?
mhm, mhm.
Okay. So the women in California, how could they find you and get the self-defense help that you're offering?
So everything is online,
Okay.
so anybody, even from the East Coast or even a different country, can find me that way. And
Wonderful.
then I had started with group course, so I've brought through a few different groups of women through the online course.
Okay.
So they study the lesson or the module themselves for the week. It only takes about an hour a week. And then on the weekends, we would meet on Zoom and then kind of review everything.
Great.
And I give them like some downloads and checklists of things they can be doing to start this like lifestyle of living safely.
Wonderful.
And then we just do that through the 4 weeks. And then I also started offering one-to-one help because I realize, some people need my help right away or they have a special circumstance. And then I did make the course like an immediate download for people who trust themselves to self-study and actually go through it all.
Okay, so there are a few different options when it comes to taking the course. Okay, this
Uh-huh.
is wonderful to hear. Now, I do have two questions for you. Number one, how is your son during all this? How is he now?
Hmm.
Because from a mother's standpoint, you do the best that you know how to do with the blessings that God have provided you. There's no perfect parent out there. You just
Hmm.
do the best that you know how to do. There's no manual to this
Right.
parenting life.
Right. Yeah.
So, how is your son? What is your relationship with him? That's the first question. And the second question is, what advice do you have to offer for women who are, number one, presently in the situation now, and for a different type of woman who maybe has just gotten out?
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess
Great
three
question.
questions. Yeah.
Yes. Right. So, first of all, my son is doing great. He's in college and he does have some contact with his dad.
Okay.
They have telephone conversations, but he has not gone to see him. And he, my son, you know, I check in on him and he says, "I'm fine, mom. I'm fine, mom." He doesn't want to really talk about it. So
Okay.
I told him, this is important. You need to notice your feelings and talk about it, even if it's not with me.
Mhm.
So he's confided in a couple different people, throughout the years.
Okay.
So, but overall, he's doing really well. And most people that find out our story, thank God, always say, he seems to be doing so well. I never would have known, that this was your life before. So I feel very blessed. And there isn't a day that goes by where I don't thank God for, finally getting to see the light at the end of the tunnel there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
Hmm.
That's such a blessing because you want the best for your children. You
Of
really,
course.
really do. And, you never want your situation to be in any traumatic situation or experience it. But, you know,
Hmm.
some things this course called life throws at you, you just have to figure out how to deal with it the best way you know how.
Right.
Okay. So now what advice do you have to offer for the two type of women? Either the women who are presently in the situation right now
Hmm.
and who are and the women who are able to get out some way
Hmm.
somehow.
hmm So, first of all, I would tell the women who find themselves in a situation like I did, uh, I'm so sorry. And it's not your fault. There's nothing wrong with you,
Mhm.
even though they try to make you think there is. And there is light at the end of the tunnel. I know it doesn't feel like there is, but there is. Trust me, trust me. And I know it feels overwhelming, but you're way stronger than you think you are. Because if I look back at myself, oh my gosh, I was this like shy, naive young mom, I there's no way I would have ever thought, that
Yeah.
I could make it through that. And here I am, by the grace of God. And, there is light at the end of the tunnel for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Okay, very good. And for the women who have gotten out, what are their next steps? What should they do now
Hmm.
to keep their heads up?
Right. And also, two other things I just wanted to mention. One, a lot of people don't realize that emotional abuse is just as damaging as physical abuse.
Okay.
So there's a website that I always recommend people go to. It's
Okay.
called themendproject.com. Mend is in sewing, MEND. And that talks on there about the different forms of abuse. And there's a bunch of resources on there for how to help yourself. Or if you have a friend going through this, I would recommend going onto that website. So that deals with the whole emotional aspect of it.
Okay.
And then for the women that have gone through it, I just want to give you a big hug because you did it and you're amazing. So just keep going and find resources. I remember I didn't ever realize this, but at the different women's shelters, you don't just have to live there to get their resources. They offer free legal resources, free counseling, and all kinds of other things if you just contact them. So you would find the one that's local to your community there.
Okay.
And they have a lot of help for you there, as well as, counseling and legal and that sort of thing. And then also, two other things. I did it. I did what I did because number one, I mainly just wanted to break this cycle of abuse. And I knew if I didn't do it, my son would end up being abusive as well. And the cycle would just continue, continue, continue.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So for our kids, it's very important that we stop this cycle. Otherwise, they grow up to then abuse. And I can't remember the exact stat, but it's very high.
Okay.
And that if kids grow up like that, they just perpetuate it.
Okay.
So it's very important, even though you don't think you can handle it and you don't know where the hell the money's going to come from,
Mm-hmm.
do it.
Got it.
I remember thinking I would way rather live in my car with my kid and have my peace than live in the big, nice house that we had just purchased together.
Than living in hell.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally understand. Oh, Mandy, I can only imagine that time that you were experiencing how it was. I've never been in the situation that you have. So to say I'm understanding exactly what you went through, I would be lying, but I can relate. My trauma might be different, even though it's infidelity. But my gosh, it's just however you look at it, it's you got out of that situation, the physical abuse. You took your son and you left. And like you said, you would have rather been in your car. Luckily enough, you had such great support system with your parents who were there by your side. Sometimes that is not always the case. And that's understandable because not everyone has a support system. You may be in a town where no one is there. Absolutely no one. But as we end today's episode, definitely the advice that Mandi has to offer. If you are in that situation, it is not your fault. You are not the cause of this, and don't blame yourself for anything that you're going through. You are not the cause for someone's mental illness. You are not the cause for someone's poor decisions that they're making of how they're treating you. Regardless, it's never okay for someone to treat you badly. Um, the website that she offered, that information will also be on the bottom of the website for you guys to go to definitely educate yourself on emotional abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, and any other information that that website has to offer. So all of us can be educated. So you can see the signs. One good thing that Mandi said, you're young, you're naive, you don't know. There's no risk proof plan to this thing called relationship. Every new relationship you're learning as you go, as I always have said. This woman here was still able to keep her focus. She's now been married 13 years to an awesome man. Don't put everyone in that box, especially. Just because one person did a bad thing, it doesn't mean everyone's bad. Really, truly, as crazy as it may sound, life is about risk. But when you are in a bad situation, remove yourself as soon as you possibly can. Separate yourself because that person needs to heal before any good can come out of the situation. So again, we want to thank you guys for listening to this episode. Mandi, thank you so much for sharing your story. It will definitely be a light of encouragement to someone out there. And as always, when we always end, love yourself, voice yourself, be yourself. Till the next episode, guys, have a great day. Thanks for tuning in to Femme Parler Podcast. If you want to continue the conversation or share your takeaways, I want to hear from you. Head on over to the website or join our Facebook community and comment your favorite part of the show or share your thoughts. I want to hear what you have to say. Don't forget to rate and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Chat with you next week.